Hello, hello, hello. So for this video lecture, we are going to be looking into the idea of dystopian fiction. This is a narrative form that is really common in a lot of young adult fiction, and it runs contrast with the idea of a utopia, which is a perfect or ideal society. So then a dystopia would be the opposite of that, a society that is not ideal. It allows us to imagine the future based on the present. It asks us what the future might look like based on what's happening in the present. So, a utopia is a place, state, or condition that is ideally perfect. The term was initially coined by Sir Thomas More in his book Utopia, when a sailor lands on an island where everybody is perfectly happy all the time. And what I always found interesting about Utopia is the fact that the main character actually chooses to leave this perfect society because he thinks it's too perfect and it's kind of boring. But that's, a conversation for another time. A dystopia, again, is the opposite of this. On the surface, they look perfect. But the more that we look at them, the more we realize how wrong things are. This is a futuristic, imagined universe in which oppressive societal control and the illusion of a perfect society are maintained through corporate, bureaucratic, technological, moral, or totalitarian control. These are worst-case scenarios and are exaggerated to make a criticism about a current trend, a social norm, or a political system. In the 1950s, George Orwell wrote perhaps the most famous dystopian novel of all time, 1984, in which he predicted a society completely controlled by technology, where people are controlled by manipulating the way that they see the world. Most dystopian societies share a lot of the same characteristics. First, there's the use of propaganda to control the citizens in the society. Information, independent thought, and freedom are restricted. A figurehead like a dictator or a concept such as a master race are worshipped by the citizens of this society. The citizens are under constant surveillance, and they live in a limited or a contained world. They're separated from the world around them. And because of this, they fear others, or they fear the world outside of their own society. They live in a dehumanized state, and the natural world, at least as far as we know it, is ruined or destroyed. Here, conformity is good, and individuality and dissent are not just bad, but dangerous. And finally, there's an illusion that this is actually a perfect utopian society. The citizens are fooled into thinking that they're living in a perfect world, but in reality, it's anything but. Some ways that the citizens of these societies are controlled include corporate control, or when one or more large corporations control society through products or advertising or the media. Running Man and Minority Report are great examples of these. Bureaucratic controls are when a society is controlled by a mindless bureaucracy through a tangle of red tape, relentless regulations, and government officials. Technological control is where society is controlled by technology through computers, robots, or other scientific means. Good examples of technological control are The Matrix or the Will Smith movie I, Robot. And finally, there's a philosophical or religious control. Here, the society is controlled by a philosophy or a religious ideology that's enforced through a dictatorship or a theocratic government. An example of this is Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, which you may be familiar with from the recent adaptation that airs on Hulu. In a dystopian story, the protagonist is often trapped or struggling to escape the society once they realize the kind of society that they're in. They do this by questioning the existing social or political system that they live in. Deep down, they feel like something's terribly wrong with the world that they're living in. And through the eyes of the protagonist, readers gain perspective. This perspective helps us realize the negative aspects of the dystopian world. Now, some of the goals of dystopian fiction are to highlight issues in contemporary society, especially injustices or wrong actions by the government, or philosophical ideas, mobthink, really whatever the issue at hand is. These then are used to predict future conflict, serving as a warning for what might be to come if we don't address these issues now. It also provides a sense of hope or inspiration for change through the actions or the sacrifice of the protagonist. So, why does this appear so frequently in young adult fiction? If you think about it, the young adult audience has the most to lose if these issues aren't recognized or dealt with. So it's a way to inspire younger people to think about issues like climate change or endless war and try to figure out how to deal with these issues right now. And some questions that you might ask yourself when you're studying dystopian fiction are: what symbols are present in the work, and how do those symbols represent current problems or issues in society? We can think about these as either contextual or conventional symbols, and remember to think back to that video lecture. Who's in control? And what or who does the body that's in control seek to control? What is the society afraid of? We could also think about this as: what are we being made to be afraid of? We could ask, what are examples of conformity that are rewarded or praised in the novel? And what aspects of individuality or dissent are looked down upon? And how does the governing body try to stamp these out? And finally, and probably most importantly, we should ask, how do we go about restoring hope?